1, 2.
Well, friends, a very good evening and a very warm welcome indeed to Holy Trinity Twickenham as we gather together for this last session in our autumn series marking the 1700th anniversary of the Great Church Council of Nicaea. Well done for making it here, those of you who join us in the building, having braved Storm Benjamin, and it really is blowing a gale out there. I should also say a special word of congratulation for those of you who join us in the building, because of course we've done these past 3 weeks without the use of our boiler, but I am glad to say there is light at the end of that tunnel, and we hope as well as light there will eventually be heat as well. But thank you for that. A very warm welcome to those of you who join us at home on the live stream, and indeed to those who will be catching up later this week on our YouTube channel. I think it's fair to say, Reverend Piotr, that we've been delighted with the online following, so thank you so much for joining with us remotely. I should just say before we begin, there's always the opportunity to add your questions, either in person, we'll receive those in due course, but if you're following along at home, to use the YouTube chat function to add a comment, either as it's going out live on the broadcast or just add a comment on the video later. And as we begin this evening thinking about the relationship between the Council of Nicaea and spirituality today, the ways in which we worship and pray, we have a couple of questions we need to put to you, Piotr, that have come from last week. And I think these come from some followers in Wimbledon. So thank you so much for posting these questions. And they ask you a two-parter, if that's all right, Piotr. First of all, they said, as we give thought to our conversation last week about Athanasius and Arius, they said, what did you mean when you described the position of Arius as conservative? So I wonder if you might be able to offer some wisdom on that.
Sure. First and foremost, very good evening to everyone, yet again, to all of us who are in our lovely church and those of us who are following online. Massive thank you for both questions, because they give me a truly great opportunity either to explain better or to add further details what I said last week, particularly when I used the term conservative. I don't want to replace one, let's say, adjective by another one because it could be confusing. So what I meant in the case of Arius, he was rejecting any type of theological innovation that will go against his understanding of apostolic tradition. Right, that's a long answer, but if I may, I would like to give you example of that attitude. So, for Arius, what was important is, like very famous theologians before him, theologians in Alexandria, look at God in a very specific way. So, first and foremost, we have God the Father, no doubt, and then through the New Testament, we know about Jesus of Nazareth, who is the only mediator and only revealer. Now, the issue is that early Christianity very soon start to call Jesus not only mediator, not only Son of God, but also the Word, Logos, and also wisdom of God. So in early Christianity, particularly in Alexandria, we've got this number of titles. I don't want to use theological jargon like, for example, Christology, but we've got a number of titles applicable to Jesus. So we talk about him as a savior, we talk about him as a wisdom, we talk about him as Logos. What is happening in the case of Arius? He is aware of, for example, book of Proverbs, chapter 8, verse 22, when, quoting this particular verse, we read, wisdom is saying about itself, the Lord, Kyrios, created me at the beginning of his works. Created me. In Hebrew is the word kana, in Greek is ktidei, and for Arius' point of view, it's absolutely evidence that if we talk about God's wisdom, that is God's word, that is Jesus Christ, we are talking about somebody who is created. So that's his traditional position, what I called last week conservative, rejecting any innovation, and that's the reason why his adversaries, which obviously call him very zealous, kind of theologian, but at the same time the one who spread error. Why his supporter, Arius' supporters, will say also he is very zealous, very committed, but he is defending the truth. And Arius thought that he is a champion of what was believed through 2 centuries in his place in Alexandria. So that's what I called a conservative traditional against innovation.
And that leads us perfectly, actually, into the next part of the question, where there was this comment that said, some of our group felt perhaps there was a bias in favour of Arius, and you didn't really give Athanasius a fair hearing.
Yes.
So I suppose you have an opportunity now, having outlined Arius' position, to say more about the historic position of Athanasius, which we have come to receive as orthodoxy.
Absolutely, absolutely. What I would like to say about Athanasius and his position is as follows. Through the last 1,700 years, we repeat the words of the Creed, which is the answer, the words of the Nicene Creed, to the very important question asked 1,700 years ago. What I did last week, I was trying to convince us all to listen very carefully to the question, because without understanding of the question, the answer is meaningless. And that's the reason why we focused last week on Arius, trying to explain what was the reason why people like Athanasius and other bishops were really trying to correct what was his Arius teaching. In addition, when we were talking last week about Council of Nicaea, the position of Nicaea is overlapping position of Athanasius. So we've got certainly, although we are not using the name Athanasius, but when we talk about Council of Nicaea, we can see definitely position, theological position, which he himself and many others will subscribe to. So that's the reason why we've got this. Well, we'll talk about Athanasius today, but as I said last week, when we were talking about Nicaea, we were also talking about position of Athanasius.
Excellent, thank you so much. And this evening, we turn to think about the legacy of Nicaea. Very often when we host theology events, a very valid question that is asked is, well, what does this mean practically for us and our worshipping community today? And we very much look forward to hearing how you explore that question and answer that today. Can I just ask you to give Piotr a warm welcome as we hear him one last time? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That's nice for your hands because it's very cold here. So you can clap throughout my presentation, no problem with that. First and foremost, as you can see, there is this completely new type of slide today for our third part. And it is about London. It's actually the photo taken by me when I was going to King's College London. And I thought, oh, that would be a lovely illustration of our third session. It is about our current life. It is about our participation in our lovely churches throughout London. And today's session, it will be about theology and spirituality. And I hope you will find this third session not just as climax, but also as a source of inspiration in your private life, in your life of prayer, in relationship with other people. So that's the reason why we'll talk today about spirituality of the Nicene Creed. How can we understand that spirituality in context of our current life in London and other places? So what I would like to do, I would like to start with a little bit of structure for today's presentation. So we need the slide number 1, the impact of the Nicene Creed. And as you can see, I put these 8 points, not because when you fall asleep and you wake up, you can remember actually what we are talking about. It's just give you more clarity. So among these 8 points, 2 are in red and the rest are in blue. 2 are in red because I also would like to try, very briefly today, present some critical views about Nicene Creed. What can we do with this Nicene Creed in 2025, or actually in the current context of our life and culture? But first and foremost, let's start with point number 1, which is related to Christian view on God and enhancing Trinitarian intuition. So if we can look yet again at the content of that statement, we've got main focus in Nicaea, as we were talking before, about the origin, nature, and relationship between Jesus, the Son of God, and his Father. And we remind ourselves that in the light of that creed, we are talking about somebody, Jesus, as God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made. And then this very important clarification of the same essence or substance as the Father. The first comment to that statement from Nicaea is, what are the consequences of these statements? Are they suggesting anything like change in God? And answer is no. In a case of relationship between God the Father and God the Son, there is no any change in God. So what is interesting, yet again, going to Arius' position, if we would follow his intuition or his theology, we would have to think that because Jesus is created, there was I will use the term moment, before creation of Jesus, before creation of wisdom, that God would be on his own. That's something incomprehensible for the fathers of the Nicaea, and that's the reason why their coexistence is eternal. There was never time when Father was without Son. There was never time where, obviously it will sound surreal, there was Son without Father. So there is no change in God. God is and will be the same. Is Jesus begetting, coming from his Father, any type of partition or extension of God I don't want to even use the image of making a dough, but certainly the idea that from one you've got suddenly two, or through the process of two, may suggest some kind of material extension of God. No. Yet again, we are talking about existence of God, which is beyond human language. We only have some glimpses, some intuitions, some insight through the scriptures, through revelation, but doesn't mean actually that we should apply to origin of Christ any material or anthropological categories. Then, is there any change in God's perfection? Yet again, this statement, God's from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten and not made, of the same essence or substance as the Father, is saying there is no any change in perfection in God. Is the creed the best human conjecture about the nature of God as the Father and the Son? The answer is, so far, it is. So let me just say it slowly. What I think this statement contains is that 1,700 years ago, certain people propose how to understand the mystery of God, and their proposal, their intuition, their intention and insight, so far throughout this 1,700 years, by various Christian denominations in the West and East, North and South, is accepted as still relevant. So actually what they said there, what they were having this kind of intuition, is still describing our Christian faith and belief. So what are the consequences of the Nicaean Creed when we think about our view and experience of prayer, liturgy and spirituality? And this is a very important point, which I would like to explain better. Nicene Creed is helping us to understand, if I may, I will ask for the slide number 2, that only through Christ, as our mediator, we've got the best access to God's mystery. So even if some people would be potentially attached to any other idea of mediators, prophets, or from Christian point of view, for example, Moses, or any saints, or Virgin Mary, or angels, whoever, only through Christ, through his mediation, through his revelation, through his nature as the divine Son, we've got the best access to God's mystery. So this is a reaffirmation of the Nicene Creed. Only through Christ we are able to lift up our minds, our hearts, and inspire our action in a way to reassemble God's love or God's message. But there is also a very important point, which I would like to mention when we think about the picture, slide number 3. What are the consequences? What are the consequences? And this is very tempting type of slide. What are the consequences when we think about our Christian relationship with other religions or other cultures? Why I'm calling this a tempting possibility? Well, because if we manage to reduce Christ from the divine Son to just yet another exceptional human being, a prophet, then potentially we can have an easy dialogue with Judaism, because he will be more or less on the level of Moses. Moses was for the Jewish people, while Jesus is for us. Then even our dialogue with other religions like Islam would be much more dynamic, because at the end of the day, our monotheistic understanding of God would be similar to that sort of pattern. So what I want to say is, to some extent, and this is difficult to kind of explain in our current culture, in our current experience of very inclusive approach to various religions, that Nicene Creed is reminding about our identity, that we are claiming to be followers, to be children of God in a different way than other religions. Does it mean judgmental statement that we are better, because we are not better? is just that our starting point through Nicene Creed is places us in different position to God than any other our neighbors that we've got around us. So it's also worth remembering that Nicene Creed is reminding us that our confession of faith on Sunday, for example, is bringing us to that kind of not only special position, but greater responsibility. What we, as children, adopted children of God through Christ, what we do with that responsibility in our daily life. Now I would like to point out two voices of criticism related to Nicene Creed, and we will need the next slide. First and foremost, the criticism which was and is heard about a Nicene statement comes from a very famous German theologian, 19th century, Harnack. What he was saying, I think to some extent is still very attractive to many people, is that actually Nicaea is reflecting certain crises in early church. Until the time of Nicaea, Christianity was, according Harnack, very pure, Bible-based tradition. So there was the element of trust in God, mainly on the teaching of the scriptures, with personal commitments to God through those scriptures. However, in the case of Nicaea, we've got this very dangerous injection of philosophical ideas, which now are changing direction of our, let's put it in this way, train. Now we as a train, we are going towards much more open dialogue with, for example, Greek philosophical traditions. We start to think not about faith, not about commitment. We start to think about faithfulness to dogma. And that was Harnack's massive criticism. However, if I may open this little footnote, I want to remind you that last week I was talking about Tertullian, early Christian theologian, very important one. And he was also asking the question, much earlier than Harnack, what is common between Jerusalem, place of faith, and Athens, place of philosophical reflection? Tertullian would say, what is common between porticos of Solomon and the area courts when philosophy is taught? And from Tertullian point of view, these two words need to be separated. So to some extent, Harnack is going back to the initial idea that actually we need to go back to pure Christianity and not to entertain the idea proposed by Nicaea. So that's, yet again, an example of that critique, but I'm just giving this example to allow you to think whether or not you agree with Harnack's position, or you still stay with the authors of the Nicene Creed. Let's go further to the next illustration, which we saw last week, but is still very important. As you remember, when we were talking about Council of Nicaea, I was using two illustrations present the sort of atmosphere, ambience who was there. And then, if you remember, I was also saying that according to some early Christian historians, these bishops who were there, they were not just beautifully painted and healthy and handsome and everything, they were also victims of persecution. And that ancient historian was pointing out that a number of them were coming to the council without hands, without eyes, their legs were cut off, and they were wearing the signs of torture as a commitment. Now, this is another approach to the same picture. This time, it's a much more critical. If we look very carefully at these three icons, and I'm not in a position to check your eyes, whether or not we are in opticians right now. We are not reading any text, what is A, B, and C. But all of us, we can clearly see that we've got in front of us only men. And this is the moment when there is another element of critique of that creed, Nicene ambience, and the whole synod. How is possible that we continue the tradition which was originally established only by half of humanity? There were no women there. And as an illustration of that critique, I just would like to point out, may I ask for the next slide, a voice coming from very modern author, a very respected scholar, Natalie Watson. And I would just quote only one point about Nicene Creed. In her chapter, Challenging the Mainness of Christ, Feminist Approaches to Christology, she says, and this is really worth thinking, Christ is seen as a revelation of God, and therefore his mainness is understood as an essential characteristic of this revelation, and therefore of the divine itself. If God is the Father who has eternally begotten the Son, then the divine itself must be male, and members of the male sex must, as a consequence, be closer to the divine than the members of the female sex. This is just the beginning of her interpretation of the creed, but what I would like to say is, in my view, the statements from Nicaea also needs to be readdressed or rephrased in light of certain modern experience of all of us as a community, because we know that actually the role of women, not just as a theologians, but as a members of parishes and churches, does not have analogy with early church, simple as that. So this is a challenge which yet again could be part of our discussion, or at least some questions, how to address this challenge coming from modern feminist perspective. But I am pretty certain this is a very important voice and should be included in our consideration, in our reflection about the Nicene Creed. So taking into account these issues related to the origin of the creed, language of the creed, consubstantial statements related to the nature and origin of Jesus, and all these words like begotten from the Father before ages, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten not made, of the same essence as the Father, the very basic question is, should the creed for all of us, for us as a community, for our teenagers, for young people in church, for children, should creed of Nicaea be translated into much more modern language? That's a very big question which I would like to ask you. And now I would like to go further, because I've got example of translation of the creed which yet again I would love to share with you, and that's what will happen in a moment, but came to me by certain pure accident. So what's happened some time ago when I was still involved in a parish ministry in Richmond, we decided to create a DVD for our parishes, for our parishioners. This DVD was called Encountering God. And I'm pretty certain we've got a picture of that DVD. What we did then, with microphone, we interviewed people from our churches. Literally, we said to them, look, what we want to have a cup of tea with you, come to your house and ask you a couple of questions, why you are Christians, why you are still bother going to church on Sunday morning, why do you think faith is relevant for you. And what we did with this microphone, we went and interviewed around 40 people, 50 people, and then, because of magic happened, we managed to create this DVD, including a particular section when we ask people what your faith means to you, what is your understanding of the significance of faith in your very personal life. And we ask this question about meaning of faith. Children, teenagers, professional people, people who are struggling with family life, elderly people in care homes. So the same question was asked around. And when we were thinking about the meaning of faith, the significance of faith, one person, her name is Lucy, gave us the following answer. If we can play that, that would be absolutely wonderful.
All the different experiences I've had have made God appear in so many different ways that he's become a bit more real. The fact that my God knows how it is to suffer has been something that's been very, very important to me at certain times.
I would be delighted to play you second time, third time, and fourth time. What she said, Lucy, is just incredible. That she finds this very inspiring, her belief that her God, or our God, knows how to suffer. God who knows how to suffer. From my point of view, this is incredible summary of the Creed of Nicaea. In order to suffer, he must be one of us, like each one of us. And we claim something that put us outside of any other tradition. Because actually, we are not saying that we believe in God who knows about suffering as a kind of theory, but who really experience suffering as the one who suffered. So if we just translate, although this sentence doesn't need any translation, but if we can have this mystical vision and just imagine yourself encountering Holy Trinity as it is, it will be the encounter with light. We will struggle to understand in that light that is at the same time love, that is same time accepting us as we are. Who is God the Father and who is the Holy Spirit? But one certainty is that because of marks of suffering on his body, we will have no doubts who is Christ, Son of God. And I think Lucy, on this DVD, encapsulated absolutely perfect translation of the central part of Nicene Creed, which we were studying, reflecting, and discussing last 2 weeks. So my question for you is actually, if you have this opportunity, obviously not now, because you can think about this question when you are going home and maybe tomorrow, how you, taking into account your personal experience of life and faith, how you would try to translate the creed that will have full meaning for you and your close ones. Because that translation could be the best one, actually. Not created by new assembly of the bishops, male and female, but created by your own experience of life. How this personal creed will sound. What type of words would you use to describe your faith in God, especially in relation to Jesus as the Savior? So we go to a certain conclusion, and the question is, do we need a creed in 2025? Yet again, the image which comes to our mind is the one that we started our series 3 weeks ago. So original meaning of the symbolon or symbol of faith is not related to a metaphor or representation of the whole faith. It's basically a token broken into pieces which each one of us can bring together to our community. And if we put this token around, it will be the same image. So I hope that we can see that ancient creed, Nicene Creed, is providing us with certain inspiration to search for that identity, but also we can be more convinced that we need each other as a church community. We need other churches to join us in this confession of the same faith. So the ancient symbol of faith is still relevant to recognize our identity wherever we are as Christians. And I would like to conclude with something surprising, but yet again, something which I hope will stay with you. If you remember, we started our conversation 3 weeks ago about desire of these ancient emperors, and we started with Diocletian, and then even Decius, and then Diocletian and Constantine, to create unity in the empire. That was their intention. Actually, intention of Athanasius, who was mentioned last week, was quite similar. I don't think Athanasius was in way of kind of consulting Constantius what he thinks about his intuition, but Athanasius had similar intention now to unite Christian theology in the same way as he witnessed this unification, political unification of the Roman Empire. And surprising outcome of Athanasius' desire to unite the church, at least in his area, that is in Egypt, happens in 367, and that was his very famous 39 Festival letter, which declared which books he believed represent the true Christian tradition. And he just confirmed, not invented, but confirmed the list of the books which in his view represent that Nicaean spirits, at the same time true authentic spirit of Christianity. And he, with his authority, signed these 27 books which, including now, are part of the New Testament. So we started with the Constantine, we started with political change, we started with desire to create unity in empire, and today we conclude actually with this effort of Athanasius to create unity in Christian theology through reading of the same testimony about Jesus as the Son of God. Thank you very much. That's what I wanted to share with you.
Excellent. Well, Piotr, thanks again for leading us through this evening, but also for the previous 2 sessions, thinking first about the politics and the context which gave rise to the Great Ecumenical Council in Nicaea. For last week, thinking about the statements the Creed itself makes about Jesus, thinking about the Christology, the theology of Jesus in the Creed, and for this evening, thinking about the legacy, leaving us in that wonderful place of unity and the call for more churches to join in this common creed. But before we let you get away, Piotr, are there any questions that we might like to put to Piotr this evening, coming out of the sorts of things we've heard? Are there any questions? And likewise, for those joining us on the live stream, please do pop your questions in the chat function. I'll do my best to monitor that. Any questions that you'd like to ask? Sophie.
Is there an Athanasian creed as well? And,
Yes.
And how does that differ from the Nicene Creed?
Yes, that's correct. When I was thinking about my presentation, I tried to choose a couple of creeds, and I mentioned earlier the apostolic, the creeds of Apostolic Creed, also the current Nicene Creed, and I very briefly mentioned the third one, which comes from Constantinople, which was a reaffirmation of Nicaea, but I didn't mention Athanasius because I was thinking, gosh, if I give you too many creeds, you will think which one is which. Athanasius' Creed, yes, was written and traditionally is linked with Athanasius, is yet again reaffirmation of that creed in a process of working that was Nicene Creed. So with his authority, he was definitely into the stage of reaffirming that confession of faith by, yet again, his authority in Egyptian church, saying, my creed is exactly the same as the creed of Nicaea, has a much more similarities with that creed, and I, as a bishop of that area, I am promoting this creed as well. So they were kind of, a massive overlap between these two creeds, but I didn't go into details how many other creeds we had around, because I was thinking, gosh, I will lose you in details and you will not be able to follow the main part.
And if it's not too simplistic an observation to make, one distinct difference is the Athanasian Creed is much longer. And by tradition, It's a creed we should recite on Trinity Sunday, but it is a very long creed. But it's very much worth a Google, so please do have a look at that when you get home. Katie?
This has been very interesting. I actually haven't yet heard the second one, so I probably have some gaps in my knowledge here. Can you just help me with some chronology? Because the thing that sort of made Christianity quite hard for me, and I think what Lucy said really sort of helps with this, was this whole original sin business. Now, was that after? Because I know that came from St. Augustine. Was that after this
original?
Creed? Original sin, because it's
original
not,
sin.
It's not in the creed, I don't think.
No.
No.
Gosh, I would say delighted would be. The expert on Augustine is in the church, holding right now a microphone. So you know, with the new doctorate coming from Oxford, I would say, Simon, please do. It's quite pleasing not to have original sin in the creed, yes. Simon, do you want to answer that?
It's a very good question. I mean, do I want to answer it? Well, I shall try and furnish you with an answer of some sort. I mean, I think sometimes the best place to start is with human experience. So rather than begin with the terminology and language of the church, begin with human experience. And I think as we look around at the world around us, it is clear that there is such a thing as human fragility, even of evil. And we need to think theologically how we make sense of that. Now, as we come to Augustine, who was born in year 354 and died in 430, so if we think about the Creed and the Council of 325, we are slightly after. But one aspect of Augustine's theology that I think is sometimes eclipsed by the fact we jump on his idea around original sin is also the counterpart to that, which is that God makes no nature evil. There is no such thing as an evil nature by creation. And these are the two poles, the tension, that pull apart from each other, and you need one with the other. So I would encourage you to begin with experience as we look around the world, and how do we make sense of what we see? That there is good in the world, but there is also hurt. And we need to find a common language that helps us make sense of that. Now, I would feel defensive about Augustine, because as Piotr has said, my own doctoral research is very much looking at Augustine, but I don't feel the need to defend him on every point. But I would just say what adds colour or nuance to his position on original sin was also this other point held in tension, that no nature is created evil. And I find that quite a helpful antidote, if I may say that. Yes, I don't know if that helps, but oh good, I'm pleased. Yeah, there was a question on the live stream, and then we'll come back to any other questions in the room. And this is such a great question, so thank you, Patricia, for asking this. Please tell us what happened to Arius. What happened to Arius?
I can't say that he lived long life and happy life after Nicaea. He was still very active, because I will use this as an example between proclaiming Nicene Creed and Martin Luther proclaiming the thesis related to Reformation. The massive difference between these two would be that within Christianity, even after Nicaea, we've got a massive change of political and theological fractions. The creed is produced, some churches are accepting, other churches are rejecting. Arians are very powerful and actually popular among educated elite of the empire, while people sort of on another spectrum of education, they would prefer greater clarity coming from Nicene Creed. The whole debate is going on and on. Do you remember my quotation from Gregory of Nyssa, who was saying that in Constantinople, where people are going to buy bread, for example, the question is not how much bread costs, but actually whether or not the Son of God was begotten or not begotten, where people are going to have a bath. The servants, yet again, will ask you not where is your towel, but yet again, do you believe in begotten or not begotten? It's absolutely ongoing process of kind of reflection. What's happened to Arius? Arius died, but when he was dying, already the pro-Nicene party was seeing him as the new type of Judas, and the one who betrayed Jesus. And that's the reason description of Arius' death by pro-Nicene party is so gruesome, is so dramatic, tragic, and unpleasant that I will avoid that right now, because I hope you will still want to have a dinner. But his death was really, according to pro-Nicene party, a continuation of Judas' drama. As I said, his followers did not disappear, did not accept it in sort of 1 year, 10 years of the result of Nicene Creed. There were different synods, once again trying to reestablish what they believe is orthodoxy, but his position and his role will continue, as he believed he was the champion of the true apostolic faith. So that's...
And Piotr, am I right in thinking that in iconography, which captures the image of the Council of Nicaea, very often there's an image of Arius often curled up in a ball at the bottom?
Yes.
I don't know whether we're able to get that picture back up on Piotr's slide. Sorry, Giles, to make you earn your crust this evening, but you might find in one of the pictures Arius looking very diminutive. And that will be him. And perhaps just as Giles is looking up for the image, are there any other questions that anyone wants to ask?
If not, I've got a question for you, those of you who would like to answer my question. Were these 3 weeks of our reflection, our discussion and presentation in any way helpful to you, actually? And if you found them helpful, what was helpful in these 3 Thursday evenings, actually? Oh, that's the image.
There we go. So just to cut in here, can you see the image on the right-hand side as you see it? Can you see there is, right on the floor at the feet of all the gathered bishops and Constantine in the centre, we have this figure in this, sort of looks like a
beggar.
Yes, indeed. That is Arius. There he is. So, yes, that's how history has decided to chronicle him in iconography. But yes, back to Piotr's question. We do hope that this has been helpful, not least because our plan is to run theology events here every autumn and every spring. And perhaps this is a good opportunity to say that hopefully in the spring we are looking to assemble a panel to take up the big question, the big topic about God and suffering. So please do look out for that. And I was, so amazed that actually Lucy's clip brought up exactly that point, because we're hoping to explore that with a panel which will include theologians, pastors, and also people who have just been through the mill, as we all do in the course of life. So please do look out for that in the spring. But sorry, yes, any other reflections that you want to add? Katie.
I think it's great, because I think the way it's sort of come down through catechism and things is a bit of a rote way, and so you just accept it, but you're not really thinking very deeply about it. So, and then you have to, but I'm saying I believe this, so I need to stop and really spend time with it, because I can't just say I believe this and not really get under the skin of it. And it's lovely to hear its origin story.
I wonder whether I might just add just one very, very short 2-minute reflection of my own, and that's to say that one of the great gifts I have found the Creed to be for me is that it has been a tool that has helped put the power in your hands, so to speak. I don't know if many of you have been to churches whose tradition it is to have services according to the Book of Common Prayer. But if you've been to a service that has that slightly older tradition, you may notice that the Creed comes before the sermon. And before I was ordained, and then it frightened me after I got ordained, I always thought that the Creed was a very helpful tool preparing me to assess the preacher's sermon. I felt like the Creed was giving me the tools by which to critique, but is it orthodox? Does it believe with the historic Christian faith? In most other services and traditions, the Creed will follow the sermon. And although I say that in quite a light-hearted way, I do think that's really important, particularly in a culture where we tend to think great preaching is what is most entertaining. And I do think that actually having the Creed either immediately before the sermon or after the sermon is a helpful leveler, because it is a criteria by which we can all assess whether the preacher's message is faithful to the historic teaching of the Christian church. As I say, I used to use that, I used to weaponize that before I got ordained. Now I'm always slightly frightened as I approach the pulpit. But I add that. But friends, could I just ask you to join with once more expressing our deep felt thanks to Piotr for all you've done in this series. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
To say again, we have been delighted with the online following. Please do look out for more events at Holy Trinity Twickenham. One of the things we wish to do well here is to do theological inquiry, to walk beside people who wish to explore their faith at whatever level that may be. I don't think Piotr's going to jump away just yet, so all those questions that perhaps you had and were just too timid to ask, those really nasty, mean questions, now is your time to ask them. But friends, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thanks again.
Thank you.